Always exciting when you get a parcel from Japan. Let's see what we got. Now then, that is a factory Granstar 13 by 10. So quite a rare drum this. I've never actually seen one. They're not catalogued. It's a 13 by 10 traditional depth Granstar. So not the power tom star. So they'd be normally 13 by 12, but this is, as I say, 13 by 10. Now, from the outside, it definitely looks factory. The badge is original. On the inside, the grommet does not look like it's been messed about with. The lug spacings look equal. The wrap seems original. Everything seems to tie up. The bearing edges look original. Even on the underside, it's the exact same profile. But what I'll do is, we'll strip it down to the shell and get an exact measurement of the depth, because if it was modified and you move the pitch of the lugs, it wouldn't be bang on 10 inches depth. So let's strip it off and get a measure on it. On the rim hardware, you can tell that's 80s Japan for sure. And the tension rods are really bulky and with a big washer on it, so I'm fairly sure that's all standard. Very common issue on these Granstars is that they suffer from condensation, and the fixings always sort of rust. So we'll get them taken off and fixed up, but if you look at that grommet, I'd say that is as original as it could be. I'm fairly sure that has not been removed. Another telltale sign for the shell is always look out for the diagonal seam. It's got the radial grain, so that tells me it's probably a later shell. So here's a Granstar bearing edge profile. It looks pretty much identical. Something else is interesting is that the lugs have got the gaskets on them. Normally the gaskets would only come on Granstar Customs or Artstar 2s. So that's a bit strange. This one nearly lost his thread on the way out. So we'll keep this lug out of the way and we'll send a tap down that and a die over this. So the shell's stripped now, and as I mentioned, in terms of height, if it's anything less than 10 inches, it must have been modified. So we'll stick that on the deck. Let's have a look up there. You can see there, that is absolutely cock on 10 inches. So that tells me it has to be factory. Another check is the hole centres, and I'm sorry, I have to do this in millimetres because I cannot work in imperial. 39mm from the centre to the top of the bearing edge. Again, 39mm, it's bang on. So that is definitely an original 13 by 10 shell. Like I mentioned, the bearing edges are definitely original and not been cut or modified. I would say that one looks a little bit lighter, but it's definitely the same profile. That's good news then, so we've got an uncatalogued 13 by 10. Another telltale sign of a Granstar shell is this little notch in the shell, and this cuts all the way down the seam. And the reason is you put the wrapping up against that seam, and when it goes round and overlaps, it sits nice and flush. But it's always worth a check if you're not sure if it's a Granstar or not. Something else I noticed is when I took the MTB50 off, it is a later one by the way, so it does tell me it's one of the later generation. It did not have the gasket on like the lugs. So it's very strange. They did offer these right up until 1997. So the later ones was also called, you could order something called a Granstar Custom in the Japanese market, and they offered the traditional depths. So I think this is either a custom order and they've used up spare parts, or they've had some spare shells and just made a kit up. I'm not sure, but either way, it's a very, very cool drum. So I'm going to clean it up. The hardware's pretty cool. There's a bit of pitting on there, so we'll get all that cleaned up. But obviously the screws is the first thing I need to tackle. So I'll repair this one, get it in there and get them cleaned up first. So just to clean this thread up, I'm going to send it through an M4 die. Now the threads are clean. So while I start cleaning the hardware up and sorting the shell out, I'll put these in soak. White vinegar works a treat. So I normally, these are quite bad, but I normally soak them for about half an hour. But I'll give these a lot longer because they're really quite corroded. We'll let that bubble away for a bit. I'll stick them outside as well because it stinks. I'll give the shell a wash round with the scratch remover. The outside's nice and shiny now. What I'll do is give the inside a tinkle over with this. And that's the shell done. So I'm just going to clean the lugs up. I always use auto sole metal polish on it, does a really nice job. I like to give these a good clean too, and the plastics up, and get them as good as I can. The mount I'll obviously strip down, get the bolt out, get some grease on there, clean it all up, and that can go on as well. Hardware's clean, shell's done. Let's go and see how our screws getting on. I can smell the vinegar from here. Nice. So even after a soak, these are still caked in rust. So what I do is, I'll stick them in a drill, get a bit of scotch, fold it in half, and then just force the screw into that. Now we've got most of the hard grime off, we'll give them a second soak and then give them a coat of lacquer. The screws have had their second soak in vinegar and they've come up nicely, so I'll clean them up, get them, the important thing is to get them really dry, and then we'll stick them in here and then give them a dose of lacquer. As usual, I've arranged the lugs so the best ones will be at the front, and then the ones with marks on will be at the player's side. All the screws are now lovely and clean, you can see in there. Got rid of 40 years of dirt. There's a few blemishes on it. It's not perfect, but I'm really quite happy with that. So another Japanese gem, ready to go back on a kit. So the 13x10's all back together now. It looks absolutely great, it sounds good too. It's quite amazing how low you can tune them.